Happy Tuesday, everybody. My name's Ian Utilli. Welcome to Attention Live, Sonic Streaming Conversations. Nigel Wright, Ted Haas, Gabe Viggers are here with me. Nigel, why don't you introduce yourself?
This is Nigel. I am Wright, voice CEO and gratitude champion, and I can't wait to dig into this challenging conversation.
I'm Ted Haas, and I'm the Chief of Ethics for Attention Live, and I'm looking forward to this conversation today.
I'm Gabe Viggers. I'm the entrepreneur in residence at Attention Live, and I am also looking forward to this conversation today.
It's like we're all futurists looking forward to where we're going. I live in a treehouse in the Aptos Forest. Welcome to the Aptos Forest. Literally, we had a slow start this morning because a bobcat just went by my window. I got very distracted. I had to get my phone out and take some videos of the bobcat. I had to get my boys and show my boys, look, there's a bobcat. It's a very muscular bobcat. It was a very, very tiny bobcat, but I still wouldn't want to get in a fight with it. So we're going to get started. And for those that are watching live, thanks for your attention. If you're watching the archive, we appreciate you giving us time to share our thoughts on challenges. So today I will be interviewing Gabe about challenges and maybe a favorite failure on entrepreneurship. Gabe will interview Ted regarding ethics. Ted will interview Nigel regarding voice diversity, and Nigel will interview me regarding family. So Ted and Nigel, why don't the two of you jump off, and Gabe and I are going to do our one-on-one interview for the next 5 minutes, and then I'll jump off, and Ted, you will jump back on to be interviewed by Gabe. All right. Gabe, let me just hide non-video participants. There it is. Look at that glory. Just the two of us, Gabe. Just the two of us, live streaming to the world. Are you ready to get started? Because I am.
I am. I'm ready to go.
I met you at 14 years old. You had already been an entrepreneur in the Reading area for a couple of years. I was really thankful to connect with you and that you've been a part of our team now for really almost 4 years. Now you're a man. You're 18. You have started off as one of our interns, and now you're our entrepreneur in residence working on special projects and much, much more. Let's talk a bit about challenges. We can go as raw, authentic, vulnerable, transparent, painful as you want to go, but also I would invite you to be optimistic in your response, maybe talking about something in the nature of a favorite failure. So the mic is yours and you have my attention.
All right. So I would say a big challenge that has helped me is every day is a challenge when you're 17 or 18 years old and you're working in the tech space. I would say it feels like every day is an investment into my future because at the moment I'm not attending college. This is my schooling, is actually being in a tech company, living in the ecosystem, learning all that new stuff. And because all of it's new, you don't get taught 95% of the stuff I've learned in high school. I didn't learn any of that sort of stuff. Working as an intern for a while and grinding out a reputation, making like 2,000 plus NFTs. That was a challenge that I think definitely has benefited me because now I've sort of become a little higher than an intern because I've grinded out that time. Also, I would say one big challenge was my one Google startup weekend that I lost, that I pitched my idea at. I lost on a critical error. And the critical error was I won by points. I won by judges' votes, but I lost by critical error because they said you couldn't have worked on the idea beforehand. And I had said at the end of my speech was that I've thought about this idea for a while, but I was like 12, so I didn't really think that. And then they said that disqualified me because I had thought about it for a while. And so that just makes me think sometimes that a lot about every detail matters sometimes, and you should really read between the lines. Like you can't just let anything go past you. Sometimes you need to really look into things. And so, yeah, I haven't really had.
Let me ask on that. So just for those, I know the story really well. You're 12 years old. Your dad takes you to the Google Startup Weekend. Same place I met you 2 years later. Same place I met you 4 years ago. So 6 years ago, you're 12 years old. You have an idea for bow ties. You called it Justice Bows. Really cool bow ties. I've always liked the bow ties that you created. And you go and you do the startup weekend. There was probably an advantage. You're a 12-year-old. So everybody's like, look at this kid. This is amazing. So maybe that was an advantage. And a challenge also is that you're 12, so you didn't really understand exactly how to talk about your creation, and you said something that triggered the judges and basically like, oh, sorry, timeout, you're disqualified,
Or
you don't
really
get
just
to win.
interact with professional people. That was also, I'm 12. Like, yeah. When you're 12, you talk to everyone like they're 12. So
My oldest son behind me is 12 and my youngest is 8, which is crazy to think that you were his age when you did that. Did you have people join your team when you were 12 for the,
I
so how many
had,
people joined your team, and what was the challenge in terms of being a leader of a whole team that's older than you?
it was definitely interesting. It was definitely interesting. I think we had like 2 programmers, a designer, and then 2 people that were involved in marketing. And it was just fair. We built the website and everything in that weekend. And we launched it and all that. It was just very, well, I mean, it was a lot of you do this, you do that, because I'm couldn't really, you know, build a website. I'm 12. I mean, I'm sure there's 12-year-olds nowadays that can build a website in 4 seconds. But I mean, I just wasn't as aware of everything going on. I was just, because my main job they had me do was work on pitch and literally make the bow ties and sew them. That was what my job was as CEO, was to make,
Right.
actually generate the bow ties. And so, yeah, I generated
That's
the
an
bow
important
ties
job.
and pitches, and that was what my job was. And I gave out some orders, but I mean, a lot of people sort of knew what they needed to do. Website, this, that, take photos.
Right.
And so it was awesome.
Let's wrap up this conversation with a failure of somebody else, maybe somebody that's well known that you've learned from. You know, like a couple that I just was talking about with a friend of mine last night, like the Nike CEO. That company was bankrupt for like several years. They were like on the edge of bankruptcy every day, and they somehow made it. Or Elon Musk has virtually bankrupted himself several times. And so those are failures I kind of look to like, wow, like the risk that it takes to build Nike, the risk that it takes to build SpaceX, Tesla, Solar City, etc., is pretty difficult for an entrepreneur to take on those types of risks. And those are failures that I kind of look to like, okay, you know, just remember the type of sacrifices it takes to be an entrepreneur. Is there anybody that stands out to you, or a story that stands out to you of somebody's, you know, challenges that you've learned from?
I would definitely say I watched the Steve Jobs documentary, and when he got kicked out of Apple in 1985, after a long sort of power struggle, that was definitely something that entrepreneurs can look at and be like, maybe I should be a little more empathetic and just things of that nature, because he's a brilliant man, but had definitely a couple flaws.
Yeah. Many entrepreneurs are brilliant with many, many flaws. It's kind of the combination. Brilliant, flawed people seem to become entrepreneurial. Ted is up next. So Ted, if you want to jump on, I'm going to jump out, and we're going to transition now to Gabe, you interviewing Ted about challenges and favorite failures around the topic of ethics. And then Gabe, you'll jump off and Nigel will jump in, and I'm just going to block my video and enjoy the show.
All right.
Eddie.
Gabe, let me hit live on Attention Live. We're now streaming through Attention Live, through my channel and your channel too.
Yes, we are.
Good
How are
stuff.
you doing?
I'm doing great. Loved your conversation with Ian.
Thank you.
It's great.
So we'll jump right into it.
I don't know. I think that was 12 years old. They're citing you for having thought of an idea prior.
Yeah.
It's like a technicality.
It was a technicality, and it was definitely a heartbreaker, but I mean, it was a challenge that I had to overcome, and here I am now.
Yep.
So, how has a challenge in developing a culture of ethics set you up for later success? And do you have a favorite failure you can tell us and all the viewers about?
Yeah. Favorite failure. Well, first of all, like you said, challenges seem to be the name of the game. I love the Silicon Valley statement: fail early, fail often, fail forward, because that seems like been my life philosophy. And I felt alone for so many years when I hadn't heard that statement. Like, oh, wait, everyone's experiencing this. My favorite failure, probably my favorite failure, actually comes back from when I was growing up. And one thing that you know about me and others will find out pretty soon is I'm quite tall. I'm 6'9". And the number one question I get is, how tall are you? And do you play basketball? And yeah, I play basketball. Played in college and I played in Europe for a couple of years. But my secret power was failure, particularly in the form of a guy named Chris, who was my older brother, who was 18 months older than me, which means he was 18 months stronger, 18 months bigger. He's about an inch shorter than me now. But we would play one-on-one and he'd beat me. He's so competitive. He would beat me every single time. We'd play to 11 by 1. Sometimes he'd tease me and let me get up 10-0, but he had never, ever, ever lost. He never lost.
I have an older brother as well, so I feel that.
Yeah. So, but then when I realized when he graduated from high school and went away, like I suddenly had this revelation that I got the better part of that deal, that all the failure had set me up because everyone else I played against was easier than my brother. So I did really well. That was my secret superpower. That's kind of stuck with me. So now building a culture of ethics, well, that relates to ethics because, you know, one thing people don't think of in ethics is, you know, a healthy environment. I think competitiveness is one of the most powerful forces to create a healthy environment, but is also on the flip side can be one of the most powerful forces to create a toxic environment. If the team can rally around a big goal and all align and be competitive as a team to get out there and change the world, that you can overcome so much. But if that competitive and seed gets inside and, you know, you start fighting against one another, there's nothing better than a recipe for disaster. So yeah, that's about challenges. The challenge is to be humble enough to learn from your failures.
Yeah, that's good. So I was going to ask one question. You kind of already answered it. I was going to say, what is one example of it being more toxic after a challenge or something you were talking about? You said people might fight or something of that nature.
Oh yeah, I mean, you see that. I mean, you know, you just read Dilbert and you see that that's part of the corporate culture, you know, to the point that we joke about it all the time. And certainly we noticed it. We would think it was really funny because we had intramural sports, and since we were on the college team, we weren't allowed to play in intramural sports, which were running in the off season, but they'd let us ref the intramural sports. So you know, we're in college, we're you know, males and we're on the basketball team. We're extremely competitive and we'd play really hard. And of course we had a lot of egos in there. What was funny is the guys that couldn't make the basketball team and were playing intramural sports had bigger egos and they would talk trash and they thought they were the best. It's like, guys, are you so silly? Like, you know, and you get that when you know, infighting is one of the most toxic things. You know, it happens in relationships, it happens in marriages. You go through outside pressure, and then outside pressure can either turn you into each other and make your marriage go more intimate, deeper, stronger, or if you turn against each other, it leads to toxic divorces. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's a great answer. And I got one more question before we end our interview. What position did you play, Ted, in basketball?
I played center.
You played center.
Yeah, so I was a small center. I'm only 6'9", so that's undersized. You're supposed to be 7 foot if you play center.
You have to be taller than Barkley, because isn't Barkley like 6'6", 6'7"?
Yeah, but Charles Barkley never played center. He played 3. But Charles Barkley was only like 6'4", probably. He exaggerated his height, but no, he was a beast too.
They all probably.
And he could jump out of the gym. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So.
All right. Well, Nigel, you want to uncover your and come back in, and so you can do your interview with Ted?
Yes, indeed. That was awesome. Love the sport of basketball and being vertically challenged myself. Wish I was tall just once.
I will hide my screen and the stage is for you, Nigel.
All right, great interview, Gabe.
Well, Nigel, voice diversity. Boy, talk about an area that's wrought with challenge and infighting. Pick a powerful nation that just can't get over infighting. And that's what's happening here. So, wow, challenges in voice diversity. So, how has a challenge in voice diversity become a setup for later success? Let's answer that question first. Unless you want to go with a favorite failure first.
You know what? I think I'm gonna go with a favorite failure.
So what's your favorite failure in voice diversity?
Just being wrong. Being wrong from the approach, not wrong from the intent. I think there's multiple ways to be wrong, obviously, but I think being wrong from the approach. Once I shifted from, bad guy, good guy to like just how people feel. And, to Gabe's point, being empathetic. I don't necessarily believe it's the course of action that I would take in many of these situations, or some of them anyway, but I can understand why. I think if we don't open ourselves to talking in absolutes and being closed-minded to another scenario is always what gets us into trouble. And, no greater illustration for me was in the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, where, at the beginning, Dale Carnegie talks about being on a train, and there's a group of kids playing and they're jumping around and they're doing all sorts of things, and people are looking and they're making judgments as we tend to do as humans. And they're like thinking, oh man, these kids are not well behaved. They don't have any home training, et cetera, et cetera. And then someone says something and they say, oh, those are your kids? Again, inquiring like, hey, you need to go get these kids because they're, and he goes, yes, they are. I'm surprised. He's like, oh, they seem lovely. So, platitudes. So he says, yes, I'm surprised they're doing that well. Their mother just died. And all of a sudden you recognize very quickly that what was described previously is a very narrow view of the entire picture. And that's what we do as humans sometimes. We jump to conclusions and don't consider alternative possibilities. Don't consider that people have existences that are so different than what we have, experiences that are so different than what we have. So we just frame it the way we want it, label it, and that becomes the truth. And in social media, that becomes the narrative, and then it gets shared, and then it goes viral, and people want to make up their own stories and ad lib, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
We end up winning an argument, but what's our objective? We're destroying relationships. And then, what's so burdensome to me is to see how it seems to me like media is built upon that,
Oh, yeah.
And the more arguments, the more people I can offend, the bigger platform I get. And it just builds this cycle. And well, what is your objective? Building a platform or actually addressing an issue, solving a problem, bringing people closer together?
Yeah. It's the issue of attention versus bringing actual value. For me, I am a big fan of leading by example. And the moment I unlocked that for me, I try never to do it any other way. Because if I could say, this is what I've done, it's going to be very difficult for me to empathize or even entertain lack of doing, especially when other people have more capability than I do. If I'm training for 12 hours a day or however long I'm training, and I have a literal handicap, and someone else is just physically able in every way, and they're training for an hour, and they're going partying, and they're doing I'm not going to entertain excuses. It doesn't match up, and I see that in just everything that we do, and that is the diversity. If you if you want to see a change, I feel like you need to be that change first. You need to be out in front. You need to lead with value. And then you can be in a better position to speak about what the opportunity is and demonstrate that in a very real way. So that was really the piece for me. Just understanding that this is what it takes. It's in spite of. You do it in spite of. You don't worry about what anybody else is doing. You do what you're capable of. You work to your potential. You demonstrate that, and use that to lead the way, as opposed to pointing fingers at this one and you didn't do that and you didn't do the other thing. You keep it factual, and then it works a little bit better.
Yeah. You can get as raw and vulnerable as you like or not. But I want to ask you a question. What's a personal experience you've had where you've had a personal failure that was set up for a later success in the area of voice diversity?
Okay, I'll give you a perfect one. I grew up in Crown Heights, Brooklyn. A lot of working class poor, parents. I tell people all the time, like, my parents paid more for my tuition than we paid for rent. Education was a huge focus, you being West Indian. And at that time, there was a huge, there was a lot of West Indian families. My family's from Trinidad, so there were people from Haiti, Jamaica, Guyana, just, a lot of, there was a lot of community in the West Indies. However, there was a lot of backlash, as, sadly, the same kind of continues today, from Haiti. And at that point, they basically, they labeled Haiti as the cause for AIDS. And even when I was that young, I didn't understand it, but I did. And Haitians are very passionate people, as I say it. A lot more. I had this one Haitian CEO described it really well. It's like a benevolent friction. They're active in their part. Like at least the group of people from Haiti that I had experienced that time. They were, it was a lot louder, a lot more interactive, a lot more energetic. But at that time, I just knew, like, okay, that's not how I'm usually, that's not how I usually experience it. And for me, I felt like stereotypically, that's what I experienced. That's what it is. Loud, boisterous, kind of like, like a lot of energy. Then fast forward, I get to college. And my brother just started, he's at the College of Insurance in Manhattan, and he brings home his friend Jacques. Now, I went from thinking what I grew up with when I was a young man, like in junior high school, seeing everybody I knew from Haiti was, a lot louder, a lot, more. Jacques was literally the most soft-spoken human I ever experienced in my life. And it's so funny that after that, I started seeing more of that, which I did not know existed. And that moment made me recognize that, this like judging and thinking you know everything because you just saw one little microcosm of the world is flawed. And it shifted my entire thinking. Because I went, like, it was like God. And you know what? I this happens to me all the time. I feel like God tells me, you don't know as much as you think you know. Let me show you what I mean. Because it wasn't like, oh, I see a little difference. No, it was like diametrically opposite. Like, I was not just wrong, but I was wildly off. If someone would have asked me about that, I would have been completely off. Like that, like,
that's so
unbelievable.
good. So you're a voice for diversity, not because you've always been great and accepting, but because you realized your own prejudice and grew through them and were confronted with them and, were able to change. That's excellent. Good stuff.
Yeah.
All right, Nigel, this is wonderful. Ian can come back on now. I'm looking forward to hearing you talk with Ian, interview Ian.
Yes.
All right. About diversity, family challenges. Yeah.
Yes.
Family challenges.
Excited
All right,
about
Ian,
this.
come on.
Excited. Thanks, Ted.
I moved outside just in case I said things differently with my boys in my presence. I mean, this is live stream, so it doesn't really matter
Right.
in a sense. Whatever I say about family challenges I'll be accountable for. My great grandkids can see this one.
Well,
But I figured I might be a little bit more open if I stepped outside and I didn't think my kids were listening to me live in real time. So here we go. I'm gonna go ahead and start my attention live stream, and then we'll hit the ground running.
yes, I can't wait. Cannot wait.
Well, here we go, Nigel. This is
All right.
the conversation that we're having together about challenges or favorite failures in family.
I've been thinking about this one all week. So first, I'm going to say cheers to you. I'm having my steeped coffee. Thank you.
Cheers. My coffee's inside, but in spirit.
And I'm gonna live true to my words and create a safe, brave space for you to speak freely here. So here's the thing. You're a dad, clearly. one of the things I admire about you most. You can't be wrong. You're the only dad they have. You've already won. Because I always say this to people, if you can look in the mirror and you're happy with what you see on any level, your parents did good. They did amazing.
That's good.
So you're in good shape. So please,
Yeah.
I'm super excited. Tell me, in whichever order you want, either a past challenge that set you up for future success, or your favorite failure. I'm really interested to dig into this one with you. I've been thinking about it all week, literally.
I could go a lot of directions. For context, I'm 40 years old. My children are 12 and 8. My parents are still married. They're about ready to celebrate their 50th anniversary. I met my boy's mom at 16. We got married at 21. We were married for 16, 17 years, now divorced, co-parenting kids. So when you think about challenges and diversity and, just difficulty, obviously there's things that are faced with being a father of young children. There's things that are faced with going through divorce. And there's a lot of grace in my life, right? With having parents that are still married. So it is difficult to know which direction to go, because it's really important to me that I say honorable things about my boy's mom and honorable things about my parents, because usually when we talk about family challenges, a easy path is to point the fingers. Oh, I was really challenged when my wife divorced me. Or it's really challenging the way that my dad did this or my mom did this, and I've had to overcome these challenges. Like, I feel like that's an easy path. So in light of that, here are a couple challenges that come to mind. When it comes to my father, Gary Wayne Utilli, he is an all-time human being. Like, I make the joke all the time that angels in heaven just look at Gary Utilli and are like, God, really? That was possible? Like, that you could be that? So one of the biggest challenges for me is like just to recognize the level by which my father operates as a human, from a spiritual perspective, an emotional perspective, a physical perspective, a financial perspective. Spiritually, my dad gets up at early in the morning and spends time reading the Bible and praying every morning. And he's done this for like over 50 years. That's a very lofty and high bar to try and match. If my dad is my hero and he's the example of my life and he's my blood and I'm his offspring, and like, look at what he does spiritually, like, wow, that is a lofty thing to achieve. Emotionally, my dad is very sturdy and dependable. He is not, he does not have a short fuse. He is not live wired. He does not go manic. Everything is very restrained and disciplined emotionally. Again, I compare that to my life, and I have a tendency to be very intense. And so again, emotionally, I'm looking at my father and I'm like, man,
That's tough. Like just the consistent feeling of like, okay, this is the example that was before me. Am I able to match that? Can I mature and grow into that? Physically, my dad has never been overweight his entire life. He works as a carpenter, general contractor, still today, swinging a hammer, using nail guns and saws, building homes that people live in. He's always had like the desirable body for all of his age, whether he was in his 20s, 40s, or today at 67. Anybody in their 50s, 60s, 70s would be so grateful if they could have his health. Me, I've struggled with my weight and my health my entire adult life. So again, like being the son of Gary Utility, physically, there's a serious thing for me to run after. Like I have a goal, but I can sometimes feel like it's a real challenge. And finally, I mentioned financially. My dad's never gone into debt, never spent above his means, never jacked up credit cards, doesn't buy vehicles on credit. Everything is cash. It's been that way my entire life. We went out to eat just for birthdays and we got water, not soda. We didn't really do any expensive vacations, camping in tents, not because my parents weren't accumulating wealth. He just made a decision in his life not to spend beyond his means. That has not been my personal experience, especially with the different financial things that go into being a tech entrepreneur with early startups. So when I think about challenges or favorite failures, I think it's important for me to say, okay, I'm graced with this man as a father and with an amazing relationship. We spend a lot of time together on a weekly and monthly basis. And these are all the areas that he has achieved phenomenal, consistent, dependable success in his life, financially, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And so one of my challenges is recognizing that that's possible. I can achieve these types of things if I am disciplined and make the decisions that he makes, at least something similar. And so a favorite failure is just to be reminded over and over again, like, okay, so I'm not measuring up to my potential, but I have somebody and his peers and other mentors in my life that are examples. So now I'll go to my mom. You know, my mom is one of the hardest working, most relational people. She's learned to manage her intense demeanor, you know, that would be categorized as like manic, right? She just go, Energizer Bunny nonstop. Everywhere she goes, she's making best friends. I took her to the Giants game last Monday. You know, I mean, she knew everybody's name, you know, 3 people deep all around. She knew about the kids and the grandkids. I mean, she is a relational beast. And so I think for me growing up and being like, wow, you can build relationship like that, you know, and not looking at any of the critical sides of that, because obviously there's critiques on anybody's strengths. Almost every weakness is just a strength overplayed. So I'm not going to talk about how sometimes her relationships can be a strength that's overplayed, but just the strength of that, like I've had to learn, okay, that's possible. I can make people feel welcome. I can make people feel loved. I can care for other people. I can ask them questions and listen when they answer. Like that's a possibility. And so living my life as an adult, watching her, or the way that she just never stops, right? Like she always is doing something. She's, you know, cleaning the house, making a meal, doing something that's productive. Like she doesn't sit down and stop. She's just a nonstop productivity machine. And so for me, it's like, okay, well, I don't always want to be productive. Like I want to rest, go play disc golf, ride my one wheel, snuggle with my kids. That's what I want to do. And so, you know, I like to do those 3 things like it's my job. And, but I look at her and I think to myself, okay, like this consistent productivity is possible. And finally, I'll go family challenges on marriage stuff. You know, when I was married for 16 years, I described myself first as a husband, then eventually as a father, second, when I had kids. So when I got a divorce, it wasn't because of something I didn't want to get a divorce. You know, no matter how difficult our relationship was, I just have a real high value for being a married man. And for staying married and keeping to the covenant. And so for me, like I did not ask her for divorce. I tried to resist it for as long as I felt was reasonable. And then eventually everybody has free will, and I have to be respectful of, you know, the way things have gone. That's been an incredible challenge. And what's been interesting about the challenge of divorce is the cycles of challenges that I continue to go through. So there's an initial challenge of like a life lived together for 16 plus years, children that we share, our whole life being intertwined. There was nothing that was separate, everything. And ripping those things apart and becoming individuals, challenging. And then as seasons go on, you face new challenges. When she introduces a new relationship, I introduce a new relationship, you know, or we may not be able to be together talking about co-parenting. And so maybe there's some friction in terms of like, oh, this is challenging. And the big challenge for me was an identity challenge. You know, I describe myself as a husband first. Over everything else. I was a husband before being an entrepreneur. I was a husband before being a father. I was a husband before being a technologist. So that had also come with an enormous challenges of like breaking myself back down, reminding myself I am Ian Matthew Tilley. I am who I am without the need for anybody else involved. I don't need to be married. I don't need to be a father. I don't need to be this or that in my career or in my hobbies. I am who I am, and I'm at peace with who I am. That's been an incredible challenge. So those are some of the things that I've been thinking about when it comes to challenges, is the challenge of having such incredible parents that set a tone of a life well lived and are still living that life, and recognizing the ways that I'm not measuring up to modeling those things from time to time and saying, okay, this is a failure I can overcome. And the challenge of like going through divorce and doing my best to talk about that, think about that, even, you know, restraining my own thoughts in order to think about, okay, it's not about my disappointment. It's about who am I, who have I been, and who am I becoming? If I'm to be married again, what kind of husband will I be? What areas did I cause a relational breakdown? How did I not create an environment that allowed us to have a thriving relationship? And not that everything is on me, but the parts that are on me, how can I be mindful of that, overcome these failures in family and these challenges to experience, you know, greater grace moving forward? So those are my thoughts. A little bit longer than I anticipate on talking. Those are my thoughts. Challenges, failures around family.
That was a lot, and it was helpful. I think a lot can be taken. I took a lot from that. The piece that I truly love, you know, all of it, but the piece that really resonated was particularly at the end. What I did, because that's the only things we can control, you know, what we are responsible for. And I feel like it's the great litmus test of intent. The moment you decide that you're going to do something, whether it be, I'm just going to be a great father, I'm going to be a great husband, I'm not going to be bitter.
Yeah.
The moment you make that decision and you commit, it's almost as though you cannot fail.
Yeah.
Because if you take responsibility for your pieces and you're constantly checking in and you're saying, what can I do? It's repellent to anyone who wants that to break down, because they immediately out themselves as that individual that wants drama.
Yeah.
Because if you're already committed, this is what I do, this is who I am, this is how I'm going to approach it. No matter what happens, I have this North Star. And that North Star is, I'm going to be a great husband. I'm going to be a great father. Or I'm going to be the best. I'm going to do it the best way I know how. And I'm going to be comfortable with that. And no matter what you do, I may not like it, and I may have to take exception to it sometimes, but I'm not going to be bitter over it. I just think that is really the leadership by example. And it never, like in my experience, just never fails if you truly embrace it. So I love that you took that ownership. And I'll close with this. I had someone say this once, and it always stuck with me. They said, you know, I hear people talk a lot about this word freedom. So, but what I've found is when many people say freedom, what they really mean is anarchy. want to do what I want to do, and there's nothing you can do about it. I don't like so. I think, taking that responsibility in that real way it's noble. And I find that in life, you follow that path, you will be rewarded one way or the other. So I appreciate you, and I appreciate those comments, particularly on, the subject of marriage and parenting, after divorce. It can be a challenge. So I appreciate you for sharing that, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. That was good convo. Gabe and Ted, why don't you come back in and we will wrap up our YouTube live stream.
Yep.
So, Gabe, you've been off for the longest. Any input you have on Ted's interview of Nigel or Nigel's interview of me?
I would say it's good for me to learn because I'm young. Haven't really made it that far yet, and some of the family talk you guys have just had. But it's good to learn, and then learn from what everyone else has done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you, Teddy?
Oh, I enjoyed it. I appreciated your vulnerability, Ian, and Gabe. To me, you're the standout star. You're really overperforming. Not that I had low expectations, or maybe. Anyways, I've really enjoyed everything you had to share.
Thank you.
And I'm looking forward to next week. Yeah, advice that's been helpful and advice that sucked.
2 days from now, Thursday. Yes.
Yeah, not tomorrow. Yeah, Thursday. This Thursday. Yeah, tune back in this Thursday. It's going to be awesome. We're going to share about. I'm thinking right now, what advice have I taken or given that really sucked, and what have I done that's actually been helpful?
I'm truly enjoying these conversations. I really am. I'm learning so much about each of you, and I think with each lesson session, I feel like I'm growing into a better human. So thank you all for that, genuinely.
Yes. Yeah. I definitely feel that too. And just as we wrap up, we're live broadcasting right now to the Attention Live YouTube account by video through Zoom, which is basically our chance of just being vulnerable and just being like, hey, here's the process of doing these 4 interviews. Today, I interviewed Gabe. Gabe interviewed Ted. Ted interviewed Nigel. Nigel interviewed me. And as we went live, for instance, Nigel started the interview with me 15, 16 minutes ago. I'm broadcasting live to, you can see there's the YouTube link. This goes to Ian Utility's YouTube account. I'm creating an NFT. I'm broadcasting live on Amazon's Echo devices, and I'm broadcasting live just audio with an image over it. And so that's part of why we're doing these Attention Live Sonic streaming conversations. We are coming together to do 4 individual interviews to use our product, create content on these platforms, create NFTs, and make sure that we're in a consistent pattern of doing so. And for those who are watching live, or for those that watch the archive, we hope that you enjoyed it. And again, we hope that we made you laugh and smile and maybe think a little bit about some of the things that we've shared. So I'm going to end the live stream through YouTube right now. We'll be back again on Thursday at 8 a.m. Well, we've actually been starting about 15 minutes in. So maybe 8:15 a.m. on Thursday, Pacific Standard Time. If you're over on the East Coast like Nigel is, then we're looking at 11:15 a.m. And next week, that's where I'll be. I'll be in Puerto Rico for our conversations next Tuesday and Thursday. And so Nigel and I will be on the same time zone.
Yes.
But this Thursday, I might be at the Treehouse. I might be down at Capitol Village on my one wheel, floating between the little frame like I did recently. We'll see. We never know where I'm going to be, because I never know where I'm going to be. And until next time.